None of us are the same. But one thing affects us all: food. Doesn't matter where we live or whatsoever we do. This woman is completely exhausted with the initial symptoms of a cold. Will food be of help to her? Should she give the doctor a boot and go directly to the supermarket? As we know, a balanced diet is what makes us healthy. However, can food come in handy for other things? Is it possible that some food can heal us of diseases like any other modern medicine? Nowadays, we hear a lot about the medicinal properties of food. Almost every week, some fruit or vegetable apparently turns into a superfood, competent to cure more or less anything. The role of food as medicine can be traced back in time. Chinese herbal medicines are believed to be 5,000 years old and are prevalent even today. However, the West has a different story to tell. Modern Western medicine focuses more on the use of pills. It's an immensely successful method. In spite of that, it's been ineffective in curing a disease that affects almost everyone. The common cold. Here, food might come to the rescue. We're all familiar with a cold. You'd prefer not to get out of bed. You're exhausted and feel groggy. A morning cup of coffee is probably the response in the Western world. An instant dose of caffeine to make you feel better? Coffee is now being seen as a wonder drug by a number of scientists and connected with everything, be that the prevention of cancer or warding off Alzheimer's. Irrespective of all its good points, it surely won't cure your cold. So, if you consume food rich in vitamin C, you won't catch a cold, right? Well, not exactly. It's common belief that vitamin C enhances your immunity and prevents you from catching a cold. However, it's highly likely it doesn't do anything like that. However, you can still have it. Recent study has shown that the antioxidant features of vitamin C facilitate assuaging the symptoms, so it does help to some extent. But there are many homemade food-based treatments that can cure a cold. One of such is the age-old chicken soup, and amazingly, it is actually beneficial. Arguments on it vary from the simple advantages of steam through to the anti-inflammatory benefits of this wonder soup. One research showed that the chicken soup has chemicals similar to what is found in modern cold medicines. So it appears that food is useful in healing less serious health ailments. But what about more serious stuff? For instance, third-degree burns. Fortunately, there is a food that checks wound infection. For many hundreds of years, from the early Chinese to the Aztecs, it has been used as a cure for all. It has everything to do with these. The bees keep their hives secure and keep diseases afar with one of their best weapons, honey. Honey's antibiotic features make it more than just an energizer. These properties are used nowadays to cure patients. Severe burns get infected very quickly, and therefore a few Western hospitals are administering honey straight on the burns to accelerate the healing procedure. So the next time when you apply some on your bread, you can ponder over it. So be it a cold or something grave, probably food can come in handy. And blending the right foods together can wake you up to healthier mornings. None of us are the same. But one thing affects us all. Food. Doesn't matter where we live or whatsoever we do. This student here requires two types of training, one for the body and the other for the brain. Can food help him in bettering his academic grades and his athletic skills? Food works as a vital energiser which the body needs to work efficiently. So what kind of food should be eaten to enhance performance? Let's start with the physical. This student is undergoing training to become a long-distance runner, but he's surely not among the best. The first and foremost thing he should do is pile up on proteins, our body's building blocks. Food such as eggs and meat. The body requires protein, but most of us anyway eat much more than required. It might be of help if you wish a bodybuilder's physique. However, there's no proof to substantiate that consuming more than you need would enhance your overall performance. Carbohydrates are what he requires. Starch-rich food like bread, rice and pasta break down directly into the kind of fuel which the body wants, glucose. It's basically sugar, but it digests slowly compared to pure sugar, and this releases energy in a controlled way. However, the body cannot accumulate huge quantities of carbs. After it breaks down whatever it can to glucose, the remaining is saved as glycogen in the muscles or body fat. When you work out, the body depends on the glycogen. This is derived from the food you ate 12 hours ago. Once the stock is over, that's it. The most suitable time to eat is after a workout. Now is when your muscles will take double the glycogen than usual, enhancing your storage space and your strength. But it's of no use to the grey matter in your head. The brain drains out your power completely. So how can food be of use? The most terrible thing you can do is give breakfast a miss. With slipping concentration, it becomes impossible to assimilate more. Several schools overcame this problem by running morning breakfast clubs, and the outcome has been very satisfying. A stable supply of glucose for the brain results in enhanced concentration and better grades. So it makes sense to eat at the right time. But what should we eat? Junk foods are a strict no. Rats grown on the equivalent of junk food for rodents found it hard to solve a maze that they had figured out earlier. Though fat-loaded junk food is prohibited for mental growth, it doesn't suggest that you should have no fat at all. It's about what kind of fat you eat. Apparently, the old notion that fish is good for the brain holds water. Fish has fatty acids known as omega-3. Omega-3 is beneficial for brains as they appear to aid signals in leaping across the blank between the brain cells. It can facilitate a developing brain by enhancing memory and learning. Furthermore, it similarly impacts the brains of adult beings. Thus, having fish could result in you not having to waste time over thinking so long and hard. As far as this student is concerned, correct food at the correct time ought to make him all set for the challenge. None of us are the same. But one thing affects us all: food. Doesn't matter where we live or whatsoever we do. This woman might be suitably attired to conquer the business world, but food trails her no matter where she goes. She might refuse to accept the pleasure she derives from it, but she's fighting a losing battle. The evident reason for the delight we get from food is that we cannot live without it, so it makes sense to love eating. But why do we relish some food more compared to others, and can we overcome these impulses? It's been proven by science that we are born with a sweet tooth. The very first item of food that goes into our mouths has been found to be filled with energy-providing sugar and fat. And children, given a choice between sweet fat junk food and a healthy, better option, will undoubtedly choose the former over its healthy counterpart. People are programmed to have a liking for sugar, and a love for fat is one of the earliest things we get to know. Sugar gives instant energy, and fat can be stored for future use. It's the same story all over the planet. It begins with taste receptors in the mouth, quickly sending signals to the brain saying that something nice is coming its way. When sugar or fat get into the body, it impacts the brain just as an addictive drug does. And one food is unrivaled. Chocolate is a cut above the rest. It not only has sugar and fat, but it also boasts of something unique of its own. Considered holy by the ancient Aztecs, this original food of the gods stimulates regions of the brain that concentrates on the quest for gratifying reward. The initial days of a romance causes the same effects. But if this food produces so much cheer, and with such availability of highly processed food containing great doses of sugar and fat, why are we not always simply gorging on cakes and sweets? How do we control the urge? As we age, we learn to turn down the sugar and the fat high. And it's not only a preference, but a bodily change too. As the brain grows, the frontal lobe comes into play, and this is the region responsible for checking temptation. Our tastes evolve and we learn to savour other foods. Still, nothing beats sugar and fat when it comes to that pure, untainted physical pleasure. And when we are bogged down, high-energy comfort foods are usually the sole things that push our happy buttons on. Science backs it up with reason. Stress inundates the brain with hormones that apparently set off pleasure-seeking actions like consuming high-energy food. And when fat is within easy reach, it further sends signals that freeze the stress response provisionally. Hence, after a taxing day at the office, there is nothing like cramming one's mouth with chocolate cake. None of us are the same. But one thing affects us all: food. Doesn't matter where we live or whatsoever we do. Children become aware of the world through their senses, and eating includes in it well. Every sense enters the picture when it comes to food, but how do these senses function, and can we ever trick them? We can debate the entire day over how many senses we have. A number of people believe we have 21, but as of now we'll just talk about the 5 classic ones: sight, hearing, touch, taste and smell. These senses come into play when a child first bumps into a new food. And as we know, children can be extremely fussy about what they eat. First comes touch. Hands are used to explore the new food item. But when it comes to food, the actual power of touch lies in the mouth. Our eating experience is subjective to the texture of the food, whether it's the crunch of an apple or an oyster slithering down the throat. The sense that rules our lives is sight, and justly so. It has a strong psychological impact on our liking for food. If we don't like the way something appears, there are less chances of us savouring it. Hearing might not be that important when it comes to food. However, it also has its occasions. Can you picturise bacon without its trademark sizzle, and popcorn without its... But as far as food is concerned, this sense has only a tiny part to play in reaction to taste and smell. What we frequently suppose as taste is in fact flavour, which again comes down to smell. Something as sharp as cinnamon can be unidentifiable if you hold your nose. Smell is that essential.
Oh, it's chalky and hot.
Somewhat like flour, some kind of powder.
Doesn't taste like anything.
Wow, that's cinnamon.
Oh, cinnamon.
Cinnamon.
Oh, it's cinnamon.
The real taste is detected by the tongue, our system's original tool of defence in detecting what to eat and what not to eat. Coated with taste buds, it identifies 5 basic tastes. It's very clear in children. While we cherish sweet and salt, bitter and sour can go take a hike. They could suggest food is toxic or off, reasons worthy enough to avoid it. In the end, there's umami, a Japanese term for that fleshy, delicious taste. These foods are rich in essential amino acids, a reason good enough to enjoy them. As we grow old, our tastes undergo changes. We begin to relish bitter foods. We can even start enjoying foods intended to create pain. Chilies have an odd, acquired taste.
45 seconds on the east side.
Chilies get their fiery kick from pain-generating chemicals called capsaicins. But no pain, no gain. Hormones are propelled towards the brain, which generate a natural pleasure. The more you eat chilies, the stronger your resistance to pain becomes, and the more you'll need to get that same thrill. It might take some time for her to take pleasure in the kick of a good chili, but as of now, food, accompanied with the variety of sensations for the senses, just spells fun. None of us are the same. But one thing affects us all: food. Doesn't matter where we live or whatsoever we do. This man has an issue with food. He is unable to control his urge to eat, which might possibly be pushing him to death. Unhealthy habits of eating can result in misuse and abuse of food, but is there chance to change? A desire to eat should be directly associated with our bodily needs, right? Want steak to get protein? And fruit to get vitamins? Sadly, it's not that easy. It's just not the way we really eat. Simply take a look at the vast numbers of overweight people in the Western world. It's doubtful anyone requires that amount of saturated fat and sugar. For Japanese sumo wrestlers, it's entirely different because here, overeating is significant to the training. Then again, sumo wrestlers are well-trained athletes following a stringent workout schedule. Though they're obese, there's no denying their fitness. This man just keeps eating and never exercises. What's the rationale behind his endless eating, and can anything be done to stop it? Firstly, we need to understand the functioning of appetite. On a physical level, an empty stomach shoots off a hormone called ghrelin to the brain, which sets off hunger. After we're done eating, nerve cells in the brain identify glucose and start to fire, making you realise you're hungry no more. If we could control these workings, we could solve one of the biggest troubles of the Western world: obesity. And manufacturers of pharmaceutical products do just that. A simple, effective pill that would make them super rich. The solution might be lying with the South African San, or Bushmen. For over many millennia, they've been taking a natural appetite suppressant during their long hunting expeditions to curb hunger and thirst. It's derived from a desert plant known as Hoodia gordini, and it would certainly make them rich. Though this plant may curb hunger, it won't actually end all the problems. Appetite is more intricate than scientists initially believed it to be. Physical, mental, and social reasons all have their bit to do. It's likely that many things will remain unanswered. How does that make things easier for this junk food addict? Perhaps an appointment with a psychiatrist will help. People who feel low are likely to overeat, or some may simply have less feel-good chemicals in their brains since birth. These people might be overindulging just to even their feel-good equilibrium. Other views, which are even more debatable, say food itself might be addictive. Foodstuff high in sugar and fat does apparently produce the same kick as recreational drugs. But fat-laden foods can never quite be compared with the effects of heroin or cocaine. We require food, and that we derive pleasure from eating is hardly surprising. As we conclude, the answer to why many of us tend to overeat could be found in our evolutionary past. During those times, food with high content of sugar and fat were a rarity, but given the chance, it would be the first we would pounce upon. We would have had to really toil back then to obtain them, but today they're within easy reach. So maybe the actual problem is that though we're in this world of jets and technology, we're still living with Stone Age genes. None of us are the same. But one thing affects us all: food. Doesn't matter where we live or whatsoever we do. This woman is suffering from a predicament. She's worried about food. She thinks she's surrounded by danger. But is she being reasonable to be this paranoid? After all, how unsafe could food actually be? It's no wonder that people are being suspicious about food. Several studies relate almost every other food with heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and total chaos. A lot of these studies often make a mountain out of a molehill. Food kills, increases newspaper sales. All said and done, there are some real food dangers. Allergies are rising in the West. And peanuts are one of the nastiest food culprits. Those who've suffered tend to see danger everywhere. Even a single nut can make their hyperactive immune systems get into a tizzy. An explanation for the rising allergies can be the fact that today's world is too hygienic. Contact with microbes like those found in the ground might be just what we require to have a healthy immune system and rid ourselves of allergies. But our fixation towards hygiene has its benefits. Bacteria thrive during the days prior to refrigeration. This is not an extraterrestrial attack. It's a leg of ham enveloped in shimmering microbes. It not only appears weird, but bacteria can be fatal. And the best micro-assassins can be found on raw eggs, chicken, and soft cheeses. Kept at room temperature, the Salmonella bacteria multiplies rapidly with each passing hour. Food poisoning at the very least can bring about diarrhea and illness. But there are few people who go to extreme levels in search of poisons, and few foods are simply toxic. We all take precautions when picking mushrooms. However, there are surprising toxins present in certain common foods. Apple seeds have a kind of cyanide in them. The right amount of cyanide could actually kill you, but it takes a large number of seeds to reach that lethal level. A food found in Japan could kill you within a short while. The poison of the pufferfish is 1,200 times more fatal than cyanide, and animals learn to steer clear of them. A single fish's venom can cause the death of 30 adults. Nevertheless, it's a cherished local cuisine. Fugu chefs go through training for 3 years, with valid reason of course. A single mistake while removing the venomous viscera and all hell breaks loose. Japanese food lovers pay an unusually high price for what could actually be the last meal of their life. So with danger at every corner, it's worth being vigilant when it comes to food. And remember, sleep tight. None of us are the same. But one thing affects us all: food. Doesn't matter where we live or whatsoever we do. This is a trekker, all set to hit the frigid environment of the Arctic. It's food for extremes, whether you want to boost energy levels in the freezing weather or deal with zero-gravity delicacies. Our planet is full of extremes, places where life finds it difficult to just survive. If you're planning to visit this place, then it's better to be equipped. However, the question is, what kind of food do you require and what are the main concerns? The Arctic is full of water, but it is scarce in the desert. With no water, you can die within a week, as the kidneys would actually stop working. In the Australian outback, this Aborigine has found an extraordinary answer to this problem. An answer which is found beneath the surface. It's a toad with an inbuilt supply of water. A tender squeeze lets out a life-saving drink. But in the Arctic, there's no place for such toads. Here, it's food that is a rarity. Richard Spinks is habituated to such extreme climates. At this moment, he's home, getting ready for his trip to the North Pole. Such a journey requires a lot of things, starting from warm clothes to sleeping bags. However, it's probably food that he requires the most. The human body can endure hunger much longer than thirst. You can survive for weeks as the body literally feeds itself on its own muscle and fat reserves. However, in cold conditions, people use comparatively more energy, which in turn increases the need for food. In these Canadian wastelands, much like their ancestors did, these Native Americans survive as hunter-gatherers. They collect berries from the ice-covered ground and live along the path of the roaming herds of caribou. But there are no caribou herds where Richard is headed, so he will have to carry with him all the food he needs. The food needs to be light and long-lasting. One option would be freeze-dried pouches. Just add boiling water and you have your meal ready. However, there's a huge difference between doing it at home and doing it in the harsh surroundings of the Arctic. It's always good to plan in advance and to practice for it. Richard has chosen a walk-in freezer to spend the night in. Soon Richard would actually be cooking in a storm undercover. An average man requires about 2,500 calories a day to sustain himself. However, here in the Arctic, Richard could easily burn twice that amount. This is precisely the reason why Richard is carrying blocks of butter to increase the fat in his meals. It was not like this at all during the early days of exploration. The great advancement in food technology today has helped a lot. The race to space led to the ultimate frontier of extreme expeditions. Food and water posed difficulties here. Similar to the rations in the Arctic, freeze-dried food is used here in space as well. But there's one additional problem: zero gravity. Fluids just don't stay on the ground. Everything is ultimately consumed through closed containers. Nutrition and shelf life are the main concerns, but a few real foods keep our spacemen's spirits high. Ranging from outer space to the Arctic, food for extremes are actually aiding people to explore the unknown. None of us are the same. But one thing affects us all: food. It doesn't matter where we live or whatsoever we do. This woman is anxious to bear a child and keen to try everything to be pregnant. So can her chances increase through the food she takes and aid in keeping the baby healthy till the birth? Starting from the uncertain nature of fertilization to all the dangers related to pregnancy, it's often surprising that any babies are born at all. When you're expecting, what you consume goes directly to your baby. Therefore, if you favour any of these food items, then curb eating them immediately. Uncooked eggs have salmonella, and raw pâté or soft cheeses can have listeria. Both of them are deadly bacteria. A moderate amount of fish is good for you, but uncooked fish may have mercury in it, which can harm the baby's embryonic nervous system. Lastly, reduce the intake of alcohol and caffeine. Prevention is better than cure. But as far as babies are concerned, food can be used both ways. There are certain foods which can help them begin a family. The guidance of modern science is pretty simple. Adopt a healthy diet. Eat fruit and vegetables for vital vitamin supply, and to increase her calcium levels, have yogurt and milk. It's not all about women. Several of these foods can impact male fertility as well. Having steak occasionally can minimise the birth defects in her and increase his sperm count. However, don't forget to keep it lean. Excess body fat can damage sperm and cause complications in the long run. Curiously, coffee, which can be harmful for women, may actually improve male fertility by increasing the vigour of sperm. So, with the fertility issue resolved, next we move on to setting your mood right. Since long ago, every culture has used almost every food available to improve fertility. Some of them are entirely based on the assumption that sexual desire increases with food items having faint resemblances to sexual organs, while others have something more to them. Oysters have been believed to have erotic properties since generations, and it appears that it's not entirely untrue. Jam-packed with zinc, they might not actually arouse your mood, but they would certainly boost her fertility as well as his sperm production. As is expected, it's the more striking and evocative foods that get all the erotic credit. However, let's not be partial and also look at the not-so-famous ones. Though it might seem surprising, celery and beetroot may really be more helpful. The male hormone androsterone, considered to fuel arousal in women, is present in celery. And beetroot contains very high levels of boron, significant in the making of human sex hormones. Once you're pregnant, your tastes may undergo changes, and you may desire food you haven't ever thought of eating before. This food could be weird but harmless, or you might find yourself having an irrepressible craving to eat coal. This urge to eat non-food items is known as pica, and it can result in serious health complications. At the end of the day, whatever you consume goes directly into your baby's bloodstream too. Therefore, whether you have cravings or not, mind your diet during pregnancy to help your baby have a healthier beginning in life. None of us are the same. But one thing affects us all: food. Doesn't matter where we live or whatsoever we do. This is a Malaysian woman, and like everybody else, food is an important part of her individuality. From the preferred cutlery to social status, food and society are inseparable. People hardly rejoice in eating alone. As far as humans are concerned, eating is a social activity. A case in point is the family meal. It's the only time when we all get together, and food is the main factor. This may be a disappearing trend in the Western world due to the rise of TV dinners. However, studies reveal that a family that eats together is more likely to stay together. But keeping families together is not the only thing it does. Food habits of people classify who they are. It's an element of our national character and insists in holding entire cultures together. This woman is having a very strange dinner party. Every guest of hers is from a different country, and each one is having their own national dish. As much as the food itself, the manner in which they eat separates them from the rest. But each method requires training, and when you are new to it, it can be a little intimidating. A great deal of people still prefer hands to cutlery. There are hardly any foods that can't be easily eaten with fingers. However, for many people, eating with hands is a thing of the past. Chopsticks are used widely in Asia to eat practically everything. Chopsticks were first used by the Chinese almost 5,000 years ago, whereas in the West, the knife and fork have replaced them. Knives have been there since ancient times. But the fork has been a recent addition. In the 16th century, hardly anyone in England understood the point. Eating food with your hands was then the common practice through all social classes, even the kings and queens. But today, the thought of royals having fish and chips with their hands is beyond our imagination. Apparently, the higher the social status, the more cutlery is needed. Ceremonial feasts display an impressive collection. Painting your house blue in India denotes that you are a Brahmin, a high caste that follows strict conventions regarding their food and the manner in which it's prepared. Food must be cooked by someone who is from a suitable caste. This aerial view of an Indian city instantly tells you about the food habits of its people. Lastly, when you eat, or drink as in this case, it can simply mirror your social status. Timing is very important for these Japanese businessmen. This is not just a tea break, it's a strong symbol of the company's internal pecking order. The MD is the first to drink. It's only after him that his juniors take a sip, strictly following the order of hierarchy. Hence, food is not just something that unites us, it can also be something that tells us apart. none of us are the same. But one thing affects us all: food. Doesn't matter where we live or whatsoever we do. This chef confirms it's been a long journey since the first meal prepared over an open fire. But why exactly did we begin to cook? And is there a possibility that the modern world could lose an entire generation of cooks? Animals eat raw food because they don't have a choice. But humans have been cooking their food since ancient times. The primary reason is to prevent it from rotting. Keep fresh food out for a long time, and this is what it goes through. You require something to prevent it from going off. Salt sucks out the moisture from food and protects it from bacteria. Food can be kept safe to eat for years. The sun's energy has also been utilised by us. In India, they've been drying food under the sun since ages. It doesn't just keep these chilies edible for longer, it also appears to make them hotter. But where does cooked food come from? The first time we ever tasted cooked food was perhaps accidental. Wildfires are very common, and our forefathers might have come across burnt carcasses on the fringes. These natural barbecues must have improved the food's texture and flavour, and also made it simpler to digest. Once we had fire under our control, it wouldn't have taken much time to learn about the benefits of cooking. Recent data traces the origin of cooking as far back as 1.5 million years ago. And there was far more to it than just food preservation. It could have even completely changed our evolution. A strong jaw is required to rip through raw flesh, and it's not easy to digest large chunks. With cooking, we can have smaller bites. It's a much better way of getting protein into the body. And this considerable rise in nutrient intake might have been significant in stimulating our mental development. As time passed, the ways of cooking also evolved until we reached our current position. Thus, if the art of cooking is so vital, one would expect us to preserve it. However, in the West today, we depend a lot on restaurants and takeaways to prepare our food. We hardly need to cook for ourselves these days. Generations are passing by without the most elementary skills. Earlier, most of us learnt our cooking from home, but these days it's diminishing practice. Cookery has been converted into an art form by top chefs, but that's something beyond the reach of the majority of us. For many, beans on toast is a great triumph. So, if cooking indeed triggered our evolutionary supremacy, then it's probably not a bad idea to take a few cooking classes and see what we're missing. And the next time you dine at a restaurant, maybe you should leave a bigger tip for the chef.